What is going on, Comic Fam? It's your boy, the Bearded Comic Bro, and I am joined by comic creator Duane Murray. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
You are involved in a lot of aspects of media and writing, and you were in movies. You were in the
Yes.
Oscar winning movie Spotlight.
Oscar winner. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
such a great movie. And you are a comic book writer. You wrote A Better Place, which I hadn't read before. Um, and I picked it up getting ready
Right.
for this interview, and it's so
Right.
good. And now
Thank you.
you and now you're currently writing Who Are the Power Pals
Yes.
from Dark
Very
Horse
different.
Comics. So
Very different.
completely different styles.
Yeah. Yeah, I almost had to I feel like I had to put that so like my mother-in-law ended up buying a bunch of copies of the first issue to give out to to kids she knew and kids of like grandkids of friends
Yeah,
of hers. And I almost feel like I need to put a disclaimer in there. Like, this is not Better Place. I don't know if you remember, there was a stand-up Eddie Murphy used to do, and he had a little bit where he'd tell parents, like, don't bring your kids to this. Isn't me doing buckwheat. This is this is me up
right,
here swearing and all this stuff. And I feel the same way. I mean, Power Pals it's not exactly a super edgy comic, but it's not for kids. And
right.
whereas Better Place, though I didn't intend it for kids, it's been sort of pushed as a middle grade graphic novel.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, but thanks for grabbing that. Yeah, it's
yeah.
it's a different thing, but yeah.
It's so good. And I want to hop into both these comics here a little bit. But I'm really curious of, have you always loved comics, or is this something that kind of came later in life for you?
No, so I started as a child and reading my uncle's collection. So that was like, and he's an older guy, but I found them at the cottage, and it was like Jerry Lewis comics and
Mm.
Strange Tales and Twilight Zone, Gold Key stuff. And then my mom would buy me like Star comics, like Spider Ham, Mad Balls, all that stuff. And then in the '80s, as a kid in elementary school, is when I was introduced to comic shops. We had one in where I grew up, and I remember walking in there, and this was prime comic time. So I was a kid, and it was like mid '80s, so it was Dark Knight Returns,
Mm.
Watchmen. We're getting into '88 with McFarlane's Spider-Man. So like prime times, like this is amazing, and that's when I started collecting. Then I went to university and stopped, just because I had to. But weirdly, and that was the Image '90s time, so I missed all
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
and I came back into it later. But it was comics like Image comics, like the Max, like that's the stuff that I really dug, and I kept collecting. I was largely a superhero person, but then I got more like in the early 2000s into Jeff Lemire's Essex County and Matt Kint's Super Spy, like all the cool sort of top shelf stuff, which is what inspired me to bring Better Place to Top Shelf. So yeah, I've been a comic lover my whole life. It's just when I was, growing up, it was only superhero stuff, and I had no idea how to get into that. Even as a university student, I went into film because it's like that's what I knew how to write for. And it wasn't until a little bit before Better Place that I realized, oh, you can work with an artist. You
Yeah.
don't have to. Only because I think Jeff drew his own comics and Matt Kindt drew. I still saw that as a cartoonist way to make comics. And then yeah, it sort of dawned on me like I could get an artist to work with and make these comics. And that's where I switched to creating comics because I was an independent filmmaker, which is as expensive as comics are, independent films are even more expensive. And so I was taking money that I'd earned from optioning some scripts that never happened, and hired Sean to do Better Place, and that kind of kickstarted my love into creating comics because I loved that process,
Mm.
and I loved being able to hold a book at the end of it, whereas film can be so nebulous and fall apart, and there's never, especially now that we don't have DVDs really, there's nothing you
Right.
can sit and hold. Um, and I fell in love with that process. So with Who Are the Power Pals, I decided, you know what, I did this graphic novel, and now I want to try comics, like something that would come out as issues in a comic store because that's what I loved growing up. So I did it.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about who are the Power Pals.
Yeah.
Because I picked this up. It almost slipped off my radar, and I'm so glad that I picked it up because it is funny. There are multiple moments where I laughed out loud. Like even the first page where like they're having their auditions and they're two
Right.
completely different auditions. There's just moments like that throughout that just cracked me up, and it was just a really cool story. So where did this idea for this comic come about?
It came. I don't. It was so long ago, and I don't fully remember it. But I'm an actor,
Yes.
as mentioned with the, and so I'm very attuned to that world, and I'm very aware of actors who just are have come so close. And I mean, I'm one of them, to be honest. I've come really close to some really big things that just never happened, and so instead I languish in this sort of no man's land of acting. And I always, as being a big comic fan, I always loved the little morsels we'd get, right? As comic fans, in the early 2000s, where we'd get. I remember they made a show out of Witchblade, and they made that show Nightman, and that really not great Generation X TV movie. And but we as comic fans were like cling to these things, like, oh my
Mhm.
God, this is amazing. And I always kind of like the idea of people adopting their superhero personas, and so all these things came together. And as well as so I when I was in film, I did a lot of co-writing with my best friend, and we were sort of tossing this as a film idea around. It never came to be, and it only was ever just an idea. But in doing so, we butted heads,
Mm.
and so that helped sort of spur on the idea of these two people wanting the same goal but for different reasons, and going about it differently. So it was really just a whole big thing of I loved comedies, I loved buddy comedies of the early 2000s, I loved comics, and all that sort of coming together into creating this as a comic.
Yeah. And then like you said, and you have this kind of the background in film as well of and kind of that struggle. What's the elevator pitch if someone hasn't gotten the chance to pick up Who Are the Power Pals?
You know, I'm supposed to be good at this, and I worked in development for a while, so I'm really good at doing this with other people's things, and less good with my own. But basically, it's about two washed up actors who, as teenagers, had a brief, almost brush with fame, playing superheroes in a quickly canceled TV show. And now they would love to see if they can get a taste of that fame again. And so they put on these costumes in the hope to sort of promote and get people to remember those characters again, and launch them into instant stardom. Um, and then in doing so, a viral video is created, and they are given that first little brush with fame, and now they want to take it to the next level. And so what they're going to do is try to recreate that video by going out to fight low level crimes. They don't want to get hurt.
Right.
In the hopes that they can go viral again. In doing so, they attract the attention of an actual criminal who now wants to kill them. So that's basically the pitch.
So good. And it's so different from we mentioned earlier too, A Better Place.
Right.
Which
Yeah.
is uh your graphic novel that you had that it and I read that and it's beautiful like you a story of a young boy with his imagination
Yeah.
and dealing with his relationship with his grandfather, and there's a lot of struggles with loss. There's a lot of struggles with
Right.
pain, and then as a parent, how do you handle grief and how do you share grief with your kids and stuff like that. So where is it for you to decide what type of story that you want to tell as a creator?
It's hard. It's interesting. Like for as a creator, what happens with me, and I think this is probably backwards, is these weird ideas come into my head, and they're all strict. They're strictly ideas and plots and characters. And it's only while I'm sort of exploring that it hits me what I'm actually writing about, what thematically I'm actually writing about. So with Better Place, I just thought when I was a kid, I remember going to my grandmother's funeral, and it was an open casket, and I remember seeing her there, and I remember thinking, she's not here. That's not her. I
Yeah.
don't know what this is, but it's not her. She's somewhere else. That's all. And I was raised Catholic, and there was all that stuff. I'm very lapsed, but that's we were told always as young Catholic children, when someone dies, they go to a better place.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, what if a child thinks that's an actual place?
Yeah.
And so it just came from that idea, and then a kid going to explore that. And then through that, I started weaving my relationship in with my grandfather and my relationship with my mother, who was a single mom trying to raise me. And I start putting, weirdly, I add the personal in after,
Mm,
which gives it a whole other layer of thing. Ultimately, the only, Better Place and Who Are the Power Pals, what I do love writing about are relationships. And that to me is what they are both ultimately about. One is parental child and coming of age, and the other is best friends who ultimately work best when they are together.
yeah.
That's what draws me. That's what even comics that I enjoy. That's what I am most drawn to, like Essex County, like Difflin. That's the stuff that I find the best are those relationship driven stories.
Yeah. And you had some fantastic guest artists doing some pinup pages in A Better Place too. How'd those
Yeah.
come about?
So started as a fan, and early on I was really drawn to those early top shelf books.
Hmm.
And early on too, this was before everything was made into a movie. I kind of was helping those guys negotiate and navigate film options for those books. And so I developed a relationship with them, and that's yeah. So when I was doing this, I reached out to each of them and I said, "You guys are who inspired this book." And I asked them to do a page, and I didn't want them to do. I didn't want it to be. Here's some cool pinups at the back of the story. I wanted to intertwine them in the story, and that's
Yeah.
why I had the idea of using those images as aspects of the different comics Dylan was reading on the road looking for his grandfather.
Yeah. It's such a great book, and it's a great one to kind of understand what all aspects of it, right? Like, the mom's just trying to do her best and she's messing
Right.
up and she's struggling, and the boy's just trying to be a kid. And
Yeah, yeah,
and so like you're dealing with a lot of different aspects of relationships and emotions and things like this. And I know you said some of it pulls from your own personal experiences.
yeah.
Does that translate to more of Power Pals too, of like relationships with like your buddies, of kind
Yes.
of how much you pull your writing stems from real life stuff?
Yeah, there's obviously it's not like it's not a biography,
Right.
it's not this is my life, but inevitably even as an actor and as a person who also coaches other actors in acting, I'm always telling people like you've got to bring in the personal. You just do. And so that's is what's going to make it rich. That's what's going to make it compelling. And so, yeah, even something with Power Pals, not only with my relationship to my best friend, which I pull a lot from, but my relationship to the acting business and how I had to navigate that. And, doing, I did a kid show for 2 years and I was sort of torn between, I don't want to do this anymore. I hate this, but also they're offering me this much money and I need to survive, and just sort of what that would do to me. Um, these characters didn't necessarily like being the power pals even, but that's their only way of being able to achieve the thing they think they want, and so they
Right.
begrudgingly accept that's who they are.
Yeah. How'd the creative team come about for this? Because the artwork on this is fantastic as well.
It is, and it came up. I came about. So I did Sean Daly's who did the art on Better Place, and I love Sean, and we're going to work together again. But he wasn't. I didn't think he was right for this book. I reached out to my friend Michael Walsh, who is a very well-known comic creator, because he just has a way bigger reach than I do. And I told him I'm looking for an artist for this thing. So he put it on Twitter and said, my friend who's is published and is due because we didn't have a publisher yet, is trying to get this book going, and uh, so many people responded. Most of them, they're just not good. Like they're
Right.
just it's all and then this lovely attempts. It's like anime looking, a lot of anime looking things, and that's not
Yeah.
what this is. But someone tagged Ahmed, and Ahmed at the time was running his Astro Nudes Zoop campaign to do a self-published comic, and I just loved the art, and I loved the experimentation he was doing. I loved that he was using duotone. I loved that he would do sort of strip style stuff. He looked so flexible and
Mhm.
dynamic in what he was doing. So I reached out to him, I pitched him, and he agreed. So we were about to start just creating the pitch when he got the call from Kevin Smith to do quick stops. So this was actually on hold for quite a long time. And also, we didn't have a publisher, but then, so as he was doing that, I was putting the pitch together. I pitched Dark Horse weirdly separately from him doing quick stops at Dark Horse, and it was Tyler Boss
All right.
who for his wife he's who hooked me up with his editor at Dark Horse when he was doing Dead Dog's Bite, and so that's I emailed that editor and he took it on, and yeah, so that's how we did that. And Ahmed does everything except letters. He lettered our pitch, but thought, you know what, you're going to need to go a bit faster, and also I want you just focused on that. And so we
Yeah.
got Rob Jones on as letterer, and he's great.
One of the things that I've mentioned already is there's a comedic element to this, right?
Right.
How do you find the tone to figure out how you want to put in a joke or something with writing comedy? Do you find it hard to write comedy?
And it's funny because I can say this. I don't find it hard to write comedy. I find it hard to not put comedy in everything I do. Like there was time I was developing this Nordic noir show about the occult in Iceland, and they were like, "You got to pull some of these jokes. Like it's not a funny show. This is a terror." And I was like, and I can't. So I'm I'm actually the opposite. I'm constantly trying to pull that back because I can get really silly and I can get really goofy, and so I actually find it more natural for me to write comedy. And even Better Place, I had to sort of similar. Like there was times where I was like, this is a heavy moment. I have to take out the jokes because I'm
Yeah.
constantly putting jokes and everything. Um, yeah, and that's my weirdly my background in acting is improvisation and comedy. I just don't uh, get to do it very much, except in commercials. So, yeah, Spotlight's not, it's not a funny movie.
No,
Uh,
not at all.
not a lot of yucks, not a lot of yucks in that. So, yeah, weirdly, I that's what I feel most comfortable in, but not always where I get placed, both in writing and acting.
Yeah.
But it's what I enjoy the most. It's it because it feels fun and easy.
How was it for you of, writing in for other mediums and stuff to try and then, not try because you did, but, moving that into comic form, how much of a learning curve was it for you of figuring out how to write a script for a comic versus, other medium?
Luckily, as you said, I think if I had come at this without any comic knowledge, I it would have been a bigger challenge. But because I was a comic person my whole life, and because I actually read a lot of comic strips from friends who were comics people, I had the idea of how to do it. The only thing that I found a bit challenging was in screenplays, there's a very strict format and structure that is adhered to by just about everybody. Whereas comics is just so free. It's basically like do whatever you want. And like that I like parameters, so it was kind of weird for me to just think, really? But I found my way of doing it, and I don't think it's the same as everybody. It's interesting because I see people like Bendis who, and a lot of comic writers who actually write in final draft their comic strips, and I can't do that. That feels weird to me. I write my screenplays in final draft, but I write comics in Scrivener because it helps separate it for me. It helps
Yeah.
make it like this is a different thing. And the last thing I wanted to do was be, which has happened with a lot of people I know, unfortunately, because I did this. A lot of my screenwriting friends have said, "Oh, I want to make a comic too. How do you do that?" And the first thing I tell them is like, "Well, you have to love comics. You have to read comics. You have to know that this isn't about taking your screenplay and handing it to an artist and asking him to
Right.
draw it for you. It's a completely different medium where there are different things that are the strength of comics, and I think that's the biggest mistake people think is like, oh, you just take this movie and you give it to an artist. And it's like, that's not what it is.
Right.
And so don't get me wrong, I knew I had to rewrite it because it was originally Better Place anyway. Who are the Power Pals was never anything other than an idea. Better Place was a screenplay
Mm.
that I took and was like, you know what, this feels like a book to me, and I want it to be a book. And so it took a year to rewrite it as a
Wow.
comic. It's not like I all of a sudden did, oh, this scene is 5 panels. This scene, like I actually rewrote the entire thing, and it took me a year to
Oh
do that.
wow.
Yeah.
And so then if it ever gets optioned, then you'll have to take a year to rewrite back to
Think about it. Well, you know what I've discovered too is I literally this is my thing now. I mean, I will always work if asked in screenplays, and I'll write screenplays and I'll rewrite screenplays. I don't want anything to do with these things possibly being brought into other medias. Like I have no desire
Right.
if they like I know a lot of comic people are like, "Oh, I want to write the first draft." I have no desire to do that. If someone wants to take these and make them into other forums, I say, "Great, do your thing." It won't be me because it feels too separate for me. It doesn't feel as malleable as I think some people feel stories can be. To me, these are books, and I did them, and they're done, and I'm very proud of them. And if someone wants to take them and make something else with them, go for it. And ask me questions, but I have no desire to be
Right.
the person who calls the shots or anything like that.
Yeah. One of the things too I noticed in reading Who Are the Power Pals, which I'm realizing in this interview, you got to say that 5 times fast. That title, it's a
With the
tongue
power,
twister.
with the power button. Yeah, lots of puzz. Not great for mics, microphones either.
Right.
You need that
That's
P,
why I got
that
my
P
spit guard
popper.
here on the microphone.
Exactly.
It's all
Yeah,
good.
you got to get that sock on there.
Is you have a good pacing of, we're introduced to our characters, and then we kind of get like a retro look of where are they now,
Right.
type of video. And then like throughout the comic, you're getting glimpses of who the characters were as, Buzzard and Swallow and things like
Yeah.
that, the super. Where was it for you of kind of figuring out like I want to integrate who they were into the story of where they are now, and kind of find that pacing? How did you figure out how that pacing worked for you?
I don't know. I mean, like I always. It's funny because when this was an idea, we made. I don't know if you've seen it. So there's a book trailer for Who Are the Power Pals.
No,
Oh, have you not seen that? Okay, well,
no,
yeah, I highly recommend to go find
I
it.
will
So there's
then.
a trailer, but it's not like a normal book trailer. It is a live action video that I created that was a fake True Hollywood Stories teaser for an episode of Where Are These Two Now? And I had two friends that act in it, and I had a friend do the voiceover for it, and I interviewed friends to like, and I created a whole with my best friend. We created a whole video for it, and Dark Horse decided, oh, we want to use that as advertising for the book. So I recommend you go check it out. I think it's
Yeah.
funny. Um, so that was always a thing in my head, and then I was like, you know what? It actually is a really good way to quickly get some background about this without taking up 7 pages.
Right.
So I just basically rewrote it for the comic to give us that quick, and the fake auditions help too. That because that's not something we ever filmed, but basically that first bit of here's them auditioning and here's who they are, here's who they were, and now let's catch back up to with them as where are they now in their lives. um and I honestly can't remember if I ended up doing that again, but what I do is I play a lot with pacing in this.
Hmm.
I think you'll see in the second issue, like there, I don't want to spoil it because I think it's fun, but basically there's I need to get through some action quickly, and so there's some montages, and we found a way to kind of make that fun in a comic book form that could only be done in comics. And so we
Right.
are constantly playing with pace and style and tone, and we yeah, I'd spoil too much, but we do a lot of fun things that allow us to jump around in tone and visual style and all that stuff. It's a pretty fun ride, and Ahmed's fantastic.
And this is 4 issues, right?
4 issues. It's to me it's a complete and hopefully fulfilling story. But, I'll find out at the end of the fourth issue. But I will say I leave it open. I leave a little crack in the door in case people want more with these two characters. And I even know I know the story I would tell. Like it's all I already know it. Um, but it's not something I need to do. Like I think it's a nice fulfilling story about these two friends. And
Yeah.
but if there's a clamoring, I definitely know what I would do with them next.
Does that change it, of like you said, you had to figure out pacing and how to do some things quick to keep things moving along. Like I feel like you can get away with a little bit more fluff in like a screenplay, but taking a screenplay story and getting into a 4 issue comic, you've really got to pick and choose what you're cutting out and what you're adding, I think, to it, probably.
The hard part, I mean, luckily because this was never a screenplay, I never had anything I was too attached to. So
Okay.
that was, but I will say, I wrote it out. I wrote it out as, I outlined 5 issues of, and the first issue was, to me, it was going to be a 40-page double issue. So to me, it was going to be a 40-page first issue, and then 4 other 28-page issues, maybe even 32. Dark Horse said no. Dark Horse said you get to have 4 issues, and I said okay. I need them to be 32 pages. He's like, nope, they're 28. I'm like, okay. So in that I did like in that I found okay. That means I have to condense 5 issues of story into 4. So there was some things that I ended up having to condense, and I will say that it's particularly hard to do that when you're trying to do comedy because comedy's all pacing.
Right.
And I think comics are funniest when you allow yourselves non-verbal or action panels. I love a good same face reaction for 3 panels, then they say something. Like I love that, and I thought Matt and Tyler did that best with Four Kids Walk Into a Bank, which is a huge
Such a good book.
inspiration. And that's that. To be honest, that book, whereas Essex County and those books inspired Better Place, Four Kids Walk Into a Bank showed me you could do a funny, weird little story with heart in comics, and it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be sci-fi, and it doesn't have to be it just a fun little story. So that book inspired the heck out of this book, especially with how to do multi-panel pages, how to give yourself space, how to land a
Mm.
joke. Like I think they did that brilliantly in that
Yeah.
book, and
Makes me want to reread it now.
it's not I've been recommending it to everybody,
Oh
and
yeah, it's on my shelf right there. So I'm like, I'm gonna have to read that this afternoon. So
yeah, it's so good. Yeah.
well, I want to respect your time. You are busy creator and things like this. So is all your focus right now on, who are the Power Pals? Or are there other things that you got cooking that you wanted to mention real quick? Or
Yeah, who are the Power Pals is done. Luckily, it's I think the 4th issue is just in production, so we'll be doing just little tweaks on it, but it's essentially done. I do like, with indie comics, like I know I'm with Dark Horse. I'm very happy to be with a big indie comic publisher, but we still have to promote the thing. Like we
yeah.
we need to be the ones to do it. So a lot of my time is on that, but I'm also pitching my next book because I've just put that together. I've got about 27 pages done of another full-length graphic novel. Now that I've done comics, I want to go back to just a full book again, and I'm getting ready, and I'm trying to find the home for that, and so that's where a lot of my focus
Okay.
is as well. And I still get auditions thrown at me to, I still have to do that stuff, and like you said, I do so many other things, but it's whatever is demanding my attention in the moment is where my focus is.
Yeah. Well, where can people follow along with you, stay up to date with what you're creating, what you're working on, so that way they know how to stay up to date?
I'm horrible at, you know what? It's funny. I started a Substack last year and have not posted once. I
So
know, and
follow
I'm like,
Substack. It sounds like a great.
I keep meaning to. I'm like, oh, you know what? I have this whole like funny thing, and it's like, it just never happens. I'm terrible at social media, but I'm on Instagram as Duane Murray Guy is my I think my thing on that, and then I think I'm just Duane Murray on Twitter and Bluesky. And Facebook, you can't really. Facebook is my sort of one thing I keep private and
Mhm.
have actual. It's just my friends. So you can't really follow me on that. But I never post on it. So I'm really bad at it. But that's where I am, and I'm an amenable guy. Like if you want to chat about something, ask me questions. I'm always all for it. I may not be able to get to it right away, but
Awesome.
I try.
Well, gang, if you have not checked out Who Are the Power Pals, go pick it up. Order it from your comic shop. First issue is so good.
Thank you.
And just thinking, like you mentioned about giving your chance to have your comedy breathe, and reminded me of that panel right at the end. Like you literally spend a whole page of them just missing a high five, and it is pure gold.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, man. That was the one I had to hold on to because there's other panels where I'm like, oh, you're not letting me have this panel, so I'm gonna have to put the dialogue right in the panel. But that one, I'm like, no, I will cut whatever I need to keep that pay. Also, Ahmed liked it because it's like mainly six empty panels. So
It's like it works for me. My page rate's the same no matter if I have to draw just
exactly, yeah,
set of
exactly.
hands or not.
Yeah, for sure.
Uh,
Well, I appreciate it, and I could just say like each issue I could promise like has a slightly different kind of cool thing that we add to it. And yeah, I mean, I think it's a fun ride, and I hope people enjoy it.
yeah. Well, gang, again, go check it out. And if you haven't had a chance to check out A Better Place, highly recommend that one. Great book. With that being said, though, hopefully you can find some time to curl up, grab a book, and nerd out. Peace.